The first document I'm going to evaluate for accessibility is a Word document that I've used for guided notes to create box and whisker plots and become more familiar with the vocabulary that goes with box and whisker plots. One of the first components we can take a look at is the headings. Now, I don't think that the headings are exactly the way they should be for maximum accessibility. However, there is clearly a heading that's italicized and bigger font than the rest of the document. So I have a heading on the first page, and then the next heading is on the second page for creating a box and whisker plot, and again the font underneath of that is smaller. Then I have my example font is a little bit bigger than the steps, but still smaller than the main heading here. And finally, the third portion of this document has a heading as well using a box and whisker plot. So you can see that this document is separated into three main parts labeled with a larger font for each heading. Another component that makes a Word document accessible is lists that are bulleted or numbered. So you can see here that on this first page we have a bulleted list of the vocabulary words that go along with box and whisker plots, and there's also another list on the second page with the steps that are used to create a box and whisker plot. The last component that makes this document accessible is the color of the font against the background. The black font stands out on the white background. However, the size of the font is a little bit small, so a student with a visual impairment may struggle to read this because the type of font and the size that it is. Now I'm going to discuss some of the UDL principles that this document covers. To begin, Principle 1.1 to customize display. This document, since it is a Word document, you can change the size of the font and the color of the font to make it easier to read if that is something that needs to occur. So this document does meet that principle. Something else that I noticed was in 1.3, a visual that represents concepts. So that is on this first page. We have this diagram here that helps visualize the concepts that will be discussed down at the bottom of this page. In Principle 2.1, it is also discussed that there should be a clarification for vocabulary, and it should be linked to a diagram, and there should be a definition given. So you can see here that even though this is guided notes, there is a space for definitions to be written down here, and then it is linked to the diagram above of the box and whisker plot. Checkpoint 3.2 mentions that there should be examples and non-examples given. So if we scroll down to the second page, you can see that there is a space for students to follow along for an example of how to create a box and whisker plot. And then there's also another spot down here where the teacher would go through and explain this first scenario and show the students how to complete this as an example, and then they could go down and follow that example to help them complete this on their own. Checkpoint 3.3 mentions to have information processing guides. So one spot in this document that can be seen is up on the second page. There's the steps given for students to follow in order to create their own box and whisker plot. It's an organizational method, and it's also mentioned that there should be explicit prompts for each step, which is obvious right here. And finally, the last checkpoint, 3.4, says that the document should be able to maximize transfer and provide review and practice. So again, this top section right here would be the example for the students, and this bottom scenario would be where the students can review and practice the concept that has been learned throughout this guided note packet. Although this document does meet some of the guidelines for accessibility, it could still use some improvements. There's no auditory elements to this document. There's also no links or actual images other than this first diagram here. So there could definitely be some things that improve this guided note packet for students that need those adaptations. The second document I'm going to evaluate is a PowerPoint presentation. You can see on this first slide there are headings here. The main heading is obviously bigger and bolder than the rest of the page. There are two different sets of directions, so those are a little bit smaller and it's italicized. And this slide also meets checkpoint 3.1, activating background knowledge. These different problems allow the students to recall information that they've previously learned that will be linked to the new information that is about to be presented. These next three slides, unfortunately, are not accessible to students. This first one actually connects to an outside link for students to take a poll. The second one also connects to an outside link of a video for students to watch that goes along with the quote that kind of catches the student's attention. And the third slide also connects to an outside link. It's a YouTube video that applies the Pythagorean theorem to a video of a football play. In order for these three slides to be more accessible, there should have been an in-text description that went along with each of them instead of just having the hyperlink connected to the image. So that way students would have an idea that there's actually something to click on and know what the link is about. Another reason that this page and this page are not accessible is because the videos that are linked to them do not have any captioning on them. So students that may have any auditory needs, there is no closed captioning for them to be able to read what is being said in the videos. Although there are a few reasons that this video isn't accessible, there is a reason that it could be considered a component of accessibility to the document, and that is because it's a different form of media that explains the concept being taught in this PowerPoint. This slide I would consider not accessible as well because the coloring of the words would be difficult for someone with a visual impairment to read. There's also a shape on here and there's no alternative text that goes along with it. So both of those elements should be changed in order to make this slide more accessible. One component that allows a PowerPoint presentation to be accessible is the utilization of a table. So this slide does actually make the PowerPoint a little bit more accessible for students. Now, something that would help or benefit this slide to make it easier would be maybe an explanation or written directions as to what the student needs to do in order to complete this table. This slide also incorporates the use of a table and includes a goal, so that makes this table a little bit more accessible for students to understand what they're supposed to be doing and the goal of completing this table and connect it to the Pythagorean theorem. These next two slides, I would say, are probably difficult for students with visual impairments to read because of the color of the font. Now, it does include headings because you can see that the title is bigger and then the actual word problem is a little bit smaller for students to see that. Although most of what I've described about this PowerPoint make it seem as though it's completely inaccessible to students, I was looking at Table 8.5 in Chapter 8 of the textbook for the class, and there is a list of examples that go along with each UDL principle. And I noticed that in this PowerPoint there are actually some of those examples included. For instance, there is a definition slide where students must write definitions, so that's something that can help accessibility. Also connecting it to students' lives and interests, so this video up here, it connects it to students that enjoy sports and some things that they're interested in. There's also an example that mentions to include goals. So down in this slide, you can see that there's a goal listed, and also the use of prior knowledge makes something accessible. So again, up here in this first slide, students had to apply prior knowledge that will then eventually be connected to the rest of the presentation. Both of the documents that I evaluated were originally created for a traditional brick and mortar classroom. So with a little bit of editing and formatting, I think that both of these documents could become more accessible very easily for students with special needs.